I believe in Western medicine. I'm somebody I've survived pneumonia, years in India, parasites, amoebic dysentery, you name it. I've had a lot of really hardcore diseases traveling from Africa to India and Nepal. And so I believe in Western medicine, but I also believe there's a lot of other approaches that can also be very effective, if not more effective, in the sense that they don't damage you as much.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Art of Awesome. I am your host, Nick Troutman, and this is the show where we look for that secret sauce to success and the difference between the average and the awesome. Today is Monday, so we have just another phenomenal deep dive interview with a great guest, and it was a really interesting interview and conversation I had with fellow kayaker and adventurer John Fullbright. John has a really cool story to share where he kind of just talks about how he went on a vision quest and actually got struck by lightning of all things, and then how that kind of snowballed into where he is today. He went through a whole bunch of sickness because of the lightning strike, and eventually came across Eastern medicine healing and bee pharmapunture or acupuncture using bees. Very cool story, and we kind of dive deep into all of that. We also go deep down the rabbit hole into GMO foods and pesticides and how that is interfering with our planet, the bees, and all sorts of different things. So yeah, this is just a really interesting conversation, and one that I think you guys are going to like listening to, as there's all sorts of interesting facets about John, but also a lot of stuff that he talks about that might help you if you guys are feeling sick, if you're feeling like maybe you're low energy or have brain fog. There's a lot of things in here that might relate to a lot of people out there. So I think you guys are going to want to stay tuned and listen. John is actually a certified Dao Medical Priest, though, as he says, if you guys are interested in bee pharmapuncture or acupuncture via bees, please consult your doctor, go to a certified specialist. This isn't something where you're going to want to go just pick up some bees and start stinging yourself. So I think you guys are going to want to listen to this. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with John Fullbright. So first off, John, thank you so much for joining me here on the Art of Awesome podcast. Stoked to have you.
Hey, thank you so much. Honored to be on it, dude.
Cool. Well, John, you've got a really cool story and a whole multi-facet to it, but the brief history, I would say, is you're a professional photographer, skier, kayaker, just all around, adventure sport athlete. Then, we'll kind of dive into this, but you got struck by lightning, and then eventually tapped into some Eastern medicine healing and eventually found this thing called bee acupuncture. And I'm not sure if I've got the right terminology there, but can you kind of start off and just kind of give us your version of the story of kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so 2004, I was living life and a little jaded by how difficult things can be in times. And I went on a vision quest, which sounds really funny. I had no idea what that would mean and what that would look like. But that's when I got hit by lightning up in Montana. So I was on that vision quest. And then, I kind of asked the universe to set me onto a path to meet my destiny. I had no idea what that would look like. I had a feeling it was going to be adventurous of some kind, but so anyways, once I got struck by lightning, I found it really hilarious, actually, that I had that happen 3 days into a vision quest, but the effect of the lightning was really intense in the sense that when I lived through it, it was like I was downloaded all this information when I was being struck. And I didn't really understand the magnitude of that knowledge until time continued on. And so basically, it took about 6 months for the burns that I had internally to really start showing themselves as being a major problem. So my organs started shutting down. I was, according to the doctors, they said that when you get electrocuted like that, there's a lot of dead tissue, and then that tissue clogs everything up on the inside. And that's what I was experiencing. So I started having a real difficult time digesting. I wasn't able to eat certain foods, and then I couldn't mix foods. Like I couldn't have meat with grains. I couldn't have vegetables mixed with meat. I mean, it was like I had to eat just super plain diet, and I was still constantly throwing up and losing the food, so I wasn't really digesting. So I lost about 35 pounds in 6 months, and I wasn't sure I was going to live through it, but that was really what brought me into the healing realm, is that I was going to kinesiologists. They were muscle testing me and finding that I was allergic to certain kinds of minerals. I was allergic to calcium. I was allergic to vitamin C. I was allergic to food. And then the funniest diagnosis was that I was allergic to myself, which I'm like, okay, how do you deal with that? Right. And anyway, so this kinesiologist, very excellent kinesiologist, she did this technique called Namburi Pod's allergy elimination technique, where they basically reset your meridians in the body to accept allergens as nutrients. And then you just have to avoid them for 24 hours, 2 hours for each meridian, basically. And that got me digesting again. And then other than that, I basically discovered that aloe vera was the key to recovering my organ function internally. So as I continued down that path, I was recovering from the lightning issues. And then I started having a lot of neurologic symptoms that were different. And as I was healing from the lightning, I was actually beginning to get really sick again in different ways. I started having systemic arthritis. I got very dizzy all the time. I had to kind of give up kayaking because I was really cold. I didn't have any thermal regulation. And so for about 2 years, I got hit in 2014 in 2004. And by 2014, I was fully recovered from the lightning burns, but now fully suffering from something else, something chronic. And I had no smell and taste. I was having bad headaches. I was having neuropathies all over my body. I started trembling a lot. I couldn't control my hands, my nerves. I couldn't sleep. My wife would say that I was making the whole bedroom shake. I just had no circadian rhythm. It felt like no matter when I went to bed, I was just twitchy and couldn't sleep. And I was still, and I kind of looked green and was sick. And I went back to this kinesiologist. I'd been looking everywhere, and she found out that I had Lyme going in my system. And I thought, well, there's no way that's true. You got to be wrong or something. So I went and got some blood tests, and it confirmed it. I had Lyme disease and about 5 co-infections, which is really common.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the farthest thing from my radar. I had no idea that I'd be dealing with Lyme disease. I knew I'd been bit by ticks as a kid when I lived in Georgia, and with my grandparents, and I would visit them regularly. I was about 12 years old when I had been bit by ticks. And at the time, I never got anything worse than maybe the chills, and kind of felt like I had the flu a little bit, but I didn't really think much of it. And so that was, now I'm 52, and I was looking around. I went to a clinic in Arizona. They wanted $300,000 cash to deal with they said for my symptoms and with Lyme and all the co-infections that I'd probably be best off doing IV antibiotics for about maybe 9 months. And they were saying it'd be about $300,000 cash. They didn't take insurance. And so that was just not even an option. I pretty much figured I was just doomed at that point. But
wow.
I continued down the road, and a friend came to me and said, hey, there's a woman in Santa Fe that does this ancient method of acupuncture from China, but she uses bees and the stingers of bees instead of needles. And turns out that's exactly what she did. And the method she learned was from the samurai lineage. So she learned from a Japanese teacher, her sensei, in Japan. And that all happened accidentally, where she just showed up and on a chanting tour, broke her leg, and they took her to this lady. And then this healer said, look, if you would like to be a student, you should come back to Japan and I'll teach you. And so my teacher moved to Japan to learn this method. And it turns out the Taoists back in China about 400 or 500 years ago, during the golden times in China, they were sharing this information widely. And Japanese and Korean, all kinds of people came into China and were learning this stuff. And then the Japanese, of course, took it back to Japan, and they took it back to Japan and made it their own. And so a lot of the samurai would use this bee medicine in order to heal from sword wounds and other things like that. And they would grow bees, and then they would use the venom. And so, I thought it was kind of crazy. I thought there's no way, I'm really sick. There's no way a bee is going to turn my life around. And I was kind of resistant to it. But when looking at the Western med bills, $300,000, and, they were straight up saying that it might come back, it may not kill it. It may hurt my kidneys. It may hurt my liver, my stomach. I'm going to have to be on antifungals and everything because of the imbalances and with Candida. And I just couldn't go there. So I just did more research, and I realized that I got to try it, and it was affordable to try it. So as soon as I went down and got stung a few times in the first treatment, she actually worked on my entire body. My knees were extremely painful. My elbows were very painful. Of course, I had no smell or taste and a lot of vertigo, and my thermal regulation was totally spent. My wife was saying, well, I'll meet you at the river later in the day and maybe we can kayak. And I was like, well, I wouldn't count on it. I don't feel so good, but we'll see. And I went down and my sensei treated me, and literally 20 minutes into the treatment, I could feel my body's temperature rising. I could feel the spasms in the nerves stopping. And I actually fell asleep on the table. And then I felt super energized. And then I left her office and was like, wow, I committed that day. I said, look, I have to learn this. I need to be a student. I'm a student for life. This will save me. I can tell already. And I left her office, and I drove maybe 5 minutes, and I was so overwhelmed with exhaustion that I had to pull over and sleep. And I pulled over and slept for about 15 minutes. And I woke up, and it was like, wow, look at that. The sky is blue and those trees are so green, and I can hear birds, and I can hear life happening and birds singing. And I was like, oh my God. I went to the river, and I hadn't kayaked well in 2 years. And my wife was there with a bunch of friends, and I showed up, and I got in my boat, and I just started doing aerial somersaults both directions. And it was like I hadn't missed a day. My friends were like, wait a minute. You're supposed to be all sick, and now you show up and you start flipping around like that, and what's going on, man? And it was the bees. It really, I went every day for 11 days in a row, and my sensei had to leave the country, and I literally got better every single day. Every time I treated, I got better and better. Now I started having some side effects. My lymph glands around my neck started swelling, and after kayaking, I noticed I'd take off my dry top, and I would just be overwhelmed with the smell of Windex, like ammonia. And I was like, what is going to, I actually, it was so strong. I thought somebody poured Windex in my dry top to, like a joke. And I was like, what is this thing going on with ammonia? And I smell horrendous. And what was happening, it took me a couple of years to figure this out, is something about the bee venom was helping my liver and the Krebs cycle in my system release these toxic ammonias. And it literally cleared my problems in literally hours. I mean, after my first treatment, by the next morning, not only had I slept like I was 15 again, but I woke up and I had smell and I had taste. I could smell the spices in the spice cabinet. I could smell a poopy diaper. I mean, nothing was upsetting. I mean, it didn't matter what it smelled like, good or bad. I was like, I had my smell back. And that's when I realized, something major is going on with liver toxins and ammonia. As many doctors realize and many people realize, when people have liver failure, one of the things that happens is the ammonia levels rise in the blood. And when that happens, it goes all through into the heart, it goes into the jaw, it goes into the brain. And that's one of the big problems with brain fog, when you can't find you got the word in there, but you can't put it on your tongue. All of this was related to these ammonia dysfunctions and the Krebs cycle, and just not getting these toxins out of the body. But something about the bees were helping this to get out. And that's where I never looked back. I figured I'll keep the doxycycline and all the antibiotics they want me to take. I'll keep them on the shelf. And if I have a crisis, I'll use them. I believe in Western medicine. I'm somebody I've survived pneumonia, years in India, parasites, amoebic dysentery, you name it. I've had a lot of really hardcore diseases traveling from Africa to India and Nepal. And so I believe in Western medicine, but I also believe there's a lot of other approaches that can also be very effective, if not more effective, in the sense that they don't damage you as much. And so that's where, the bee venom really, from the lightning visions I had in 2004, I knew that I was working into this. I was being pointed in the direction of healing. And I kind of consider myself a reluctant healer. Like I'm now sort of, very in touch with it, but in those days I was very leery of it. I didn't want to be a healer. I didn't want to go into the healing arts. I didn't want to deal with any of it. I just wanted to stay an adventure guy and do adventures and do photos and live that life. But when you get pushed into it and you have a vision quest and you're asking for destiny, well, it put it all in my lap. So there was, I had these visions in 2004. When I would sleep, I'd have these dreams that I would be doing something like acupuncture, but I never really wanted to go to acupuncture school. And once 2014 came around and I tried the venom, then I realized immediately on the table that this would be a big chunk of my destiny, because it's an old world technique. We're not truly puncturing both layers of the skin. What we're doing is we're using the stinger of the bee to activate the meridian points, and we're just adding droplets of venom with the stinger, little teeny droplets into the surface of the skin. And that medicine is coming from the bee. It's been used for over 10,000 years around the world. The Egyptians have used it. It's still here with us, not just because of pollination, but because it's actually been shown to work really well against rheumatoid arthritis, many kinds of arthritis, many kinds of nerve issues. So basically around, the thing about bee venom is that bee venom has an affinity for the sodium channels of the cells. So as soon as you add venom to the skin, it follows the nerve all the way through the body. I can sting my foot and I'll get a wave of chills in my body that then feels like warmth.
Interesting.
And from the research I've read, it's believed that what happens with bee venom and why it's so powerful against certain diseases and cancers is that, cancers form when a cell decides it's its own little emperor, and it quits talking to other cells and starts demanding circulation and demanding blood volume. And when it does that, it says, I'll make all the cells the body needs. And it just starts making all these immature cells. That's a tumor. And as it grows, it demands more. And bee venom has been shown to be very effective in aggressive forms of breast cancer, prostate cancer, many kinds of cancers. And one of the mechanisms they're finding is that they believe is happening is that bee venom, what it does is it opens up these nerve channels to communicate. So when cells are talking to each other and you get this one rogue, trying to create its own little world, the cells attack it and knock it out. And they basically do that through communication. So it actually, if cancer starts from lack of communication, you can think about how a Lyme disease patient full of ammonia, their nerves aren't going to be communicating. Their system is going to be toxic, and they may not be getting the appropriate signals. And this was something that was kind of verified in my diagnosis and in my blood test. One of the things we saw when I was really sick was not only did I have vertigo and no smell and taste, but brain fog really bad and severe headaches. But my hormone function was completely gone. I looked on the hormone levels. I looked like a 90-year-old man on paper. And what was interesting about that is as soon as I started bee venom, my circadian rhythm kicked back on. And as soon as the sun would go down, I was tired. And then when the sun would come up, I was rested and getting up. It was really exciting that I had been lost in space. And then something about the bees had reconnected me to the cycle of time and nature in the body. And that's that body clock. And beyond that, I 2 years later, I started getting blood tests again and monitoring my hormone levels. And I went to Dr. Gordon in California at the Gordon Medical, and he was shocked. He was like, "Are you on bioidentical hormone therapy or something? Or something's going on here because your hormones look perfect." And all I did was bees.
Interesting.
So somehow, not only did it clear out my ammonia levels and restore my balance and smell and taste, but it really helped my body find its balance, and these hormones were able to talk again, So the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, they call it the HPA axis. It has a lot to do with digestion. And we see this a lot in people that have, when we look at how the body regulates itself in digestion, hormones come up as a big deal. So when you go to sleep at night, a lot of people have no idea this is how this works. And this is why stimulants aren't so good for sleep, is that when it breaks up your circadian rhythm, during the night, you're supposed to have serotonin and dopamine released at different intervals. And when serotonin levels go up, dopamine intervals go down. And then vice versa. Dopamine goes up, serotonin goes down. Well, when these hormones crisscross, that creates peristaltic action in the colon and in the guts. So when you eat a meal, it's when you go to sleep, the serotonin and dopamine, serotonin moves the bowels sort of sideways and up, and dopamine down. So if you think of it like that, dopamine and serotonin are sort of what stimulate the peristaltic action to move the food through your body. And if you have a hormone disruption, you don't get that peristaltic action. You get like your bowels become obstructed in a sense, or become blocked, or you just don't pass like you should.
Wow.
And so sometimes that root can be hormone. And this is where mold comes in, is that many Lyme patients, they may have Lyme their whole life, but it takes a stress event or it takes mold to really throw off their hormone levels. And then when their hormone levels are thrown off, everything goes into a tailspin. So it seems that Lyme is always correlated with mold or vice versa. People can, I think 75% of the world can deal with mold pretty well, but about 24% of the people just can't detox it well at all. And that's the ones that really become chronically ill with it. So it's a very complicated thing, but the body understands the plant medicines and bees, and it's able to process it. Unlike a lot of these Western chemicals we use, they're a firestorm in the body. They kill all kinds of things, including the host. And this is where I found that bee venom was so exciting to me, because humans have nothing to do with manufacturing this substance. It's plant medicine. It's nature at its best. And when you introduce something like this, the body knows how to respond to it.
Interesting.
And so it was a no-brainer.
So, John, that's an incredible story, and there's a lot of information there, and I'd like to try to unpack some of this a little bit.
Yeah.
First off, so when you got struck by lightning, which is incredible on its own, you're on this vision quest and you get physically struck by lightning. I mean, that's kind of a sign, if you're asking for a sign, if I've ever seen one or heard of one. How much longer was it until, so you got struck by lightning, you've got all these, digestion issues and stuff kind of going on in the body, and then you realize that maybe you had Lyme. How much later was it when you first got introduced to bees and the bee venom after being struck by lightning?
It was 10 years.
10 years. Okay. And within
so
that,
I was struggling for a lot.
Wow.
During those 10 years.
Within those 10 years, that's when you were having these kind of like visions of maybe doing acupuncture or something like that? Or was that when more like closer when you were doing, or when you got struck by lightning?
It was in the beginning, yeah. Right after I got hit by lightning and I started vomiting every day and got really sick. It took actually about 3 months for me to start really getting nauseous a lot, and then vertigo and all that. And it was in those times I would go and get massage. And a friend of mine does this. It's called Tibetan body language. And it's basically like hot stone therapy, but she's using the meridians and then palpation and massage. And what that did for me is that when I was super nauseated and very sick, I would get a treatment from her, and it was like extremely painful on the side that I got electrocuted. So when I got hit by lightning, it went in my ankle and then out my arm on the right side. And it came from the sky to a ski lift at Bridger Bowl. I was walking under the lift, and it shot out of the bottom of the lift. So the leader of the lightning went into my heel, and that's when the lightning followed. And as it shot out my right arm and went about 1,000 feet across the mountain into another set of ski lifts, at that time, the lightning basically, it froze me like a statue. And it locked me into this position where I felt like I was crystallized. And then when I started getting sick months later and I was doing massage, it was as if I had this like glass in my muscles. I mean, it hurt so bad when this therapist would treat me, even though she wasn't pushing very hard. The pain was extreme, and it would take me to another place. And that's when I started realizing that I was in a calling to the heel, that I had to go through this suffering. I had to go through this reconstruction of my body. And it was at that time I realized that I had thought forms in me that were very rigid, and that the lightning had done me a favor by blasting a hole through me physically. It
Wow.
burned all these belief systems out of me. And I had these, and so I kept going to massage, and every time I would get done with a massage, I would actually get hungry, and I would actually want to eat again. And then I wouldn't vomit. And then maybe 3 days later, I'd clog up again, and then I'd have to go get another treatment. And then I would release all of this stuff, and maybe vomiting, maybe not. But the fact is that after treatment, after massage, I would be hungry again. And that's what kind of clued me in that I needed to, go down that road of becoming a healer. And that's actually when I started studying this form of ancient Chinese internal massage therapy called Qi Ne Sung. And that means basically it's internal organ massage. And the whole practice works at from the pubic bone and the belly up to the ribs and everything. So really the whole treatment is in the organs. And it's all about, and what I was finding is that where I got electrocuted through my right side, where my liver and gallbladder were, is I had all these places that were extremely painful. But if I could push through them in the circular motion, like I was taught, that I would feel these, they call them adhesions, where the organs kind of stick together. So if you think about it, like if your liver and gallbladder work together, but if the gallbladder is weak, it kind of leans on the liver to get its energy. Just like if you're helping somebody down the road with a broken leg, they kind of lean on you. Well, the key with that kind of work is you got to rebalance. You can't lean on the liver forever. The gallbladder has to learn to do its job again. And when an organ leans on another one for a long time, they get stuck together, that's an adhesion. And so this type of work is opening up those circulation areas and getting things to stand on their own 2 feet. In a sense, and that's what's happening inside.
Wow.
And as I went through that process, I was getting more balanced. And again, that's where, in the 10 years, from the time I got electrocuted to the time I realized I had Lyme disease, I was recovering on one level from the burns, but I was also getting sicker on another level from the Lyme disease, and then living in a house with mold in it and not even knowing it. And so it really came to a head in 2014 when my mom died. We had finished a difficult chapter. She died of dementia, but it was interesting that she had the same symptoms I had. And it was very likely that she had undiagnosed Lyme disease. But she died and she was cremated before we were able to do those tissue samples on her to see if that was part of what was driving her dementia.
Interesting.
But I had the same symptoms as my mom. I had no brain, no memory. I couldn't remember my name. I can remember a password. I had a very difficult time, word recall and stuff. And so, as I was recovering from the lightning and getting sicker with Lyme, I had no idea. Once I got diagnosed, then I realized, okay, so I've got to do something here. And literally the bees were a godsend. They just dropped out of the sky into my lap, so to speak. And I've never looked back. It's
so the bees obviously helped you a ton with Lyme and with everything that was going on in your life and your specific situation. But how does this, is this something that everybody should be, looking into, checking out, researching, or is this something more specific towards, maybe patients that have Lyme disease or vertigo, or is it dementia, or I guess, is there an overarching theme here on what the bees mainly, or what this bee acupuncture mainly treats the best, or is there just a flurry of different things?
Well, exactly. It's like when you look at traditional Chinese medicine, the Taoists that developed this, they were master observationists. They would look at nature, and in the Tao and in the 5 element theory behind traditional Chinese medicine, everything balances something else, or if something's out of balance, it throws everything else off. So, if you look at it, a simple way to look at it is any imbalance you can treat with acupuncture, you could probably treat with bee venom acutherapy. And I say acutherapy. In China, they refer to it as called pharmapunture, because a bee is considered a pharmacy of plant medicine. And that when you add little droplets of the venom in the right points, whether it's stomach, meridian, spleen, heart, small intestine, liver, gallbladder, any of these places, it's going to tonify those channels. And when you have blockages in those channels, the whole point is to activate them to open up. And so basically by using the bee venom, what it's doing along the meridian points, it's multifaceted what it does. And so say somebody's having real big digestion issues. Well, part of that is going to be, balancing the system. And then the other part of that is going to be physically opening up those channels. And so that's that's part of what bee venom does, is when you add bee venom to, say, for example, you have a meridian point that's very sore, there's obvious congestion there. That's where normally they'd put a needle. Well, if we put a drop of venom, then the venom gets in there and then dissipates throughout the system. But what it's doing is it's calling the immune system as well. And this is a little different than what a needle does. A needle is going to open up that channel and stimulate it. It's going to create an irritation, and it's going to cause the immune system to react to that irritation. And that brings the body's healing mechanisms to that area. That opens up that area. That gives it attention, so to speak. The bee venom, because of its quality of being a liquid, I kind of consider bee venom to be liquid sunlight or molten sunlight. It's almost like light in a liquid form. And that's why it burns a little bit. When you put it in, it really kind of stings. But that stinging gives that light liquid a chance to dissipate. And then that stinging activates the body's immune system. So then you have all these immune system responses coming to that area. And so it's much stronger than a needle. And so we get kind of what I see so powerful about bee venom meridian therapy is that the venom activates the immune system so much stronger. And then since it's bee venom has been shown to be neuroprotective and neurorestorative, which means it actually restores the nerves and then can prevent the nerves from getting damaged and further onslaught. So many diseases are a lack of communication again, where the body's not communicating properly or the nerve channels are blocked. Inflammation is a perfect example of that. When you have a lot of inflammation, everything's swollen. So like if you have tendonitis, your tendons are swollen inside the sheath, you're going to have more friction. So inflammation creates more inflammation. So bee venom is really interesting because it's actually been proven to be about 100 times more effective for inflammation than, say, cortisone. Wow. Cortisone has a lot of negative qualities, like it can become addictive, where you have to have it. You have to use bigger doses to get the same effect. But then it also has a lot of negative side effects like hollowing of bones, weakening of bones, weakening of nerve tissues, weakening of the cell wall, thinning of the cell wall. Venom, on the other hand, has shown to be increases bone density. It stops inflammation in such a huge way that it allows that circulation to be restored. And, it has so many different benefits that, I think it's something that I would use for everything. Sports injuries, basic headaches, arthritis. It's been proven to work. Anything you can treat with traditional Chinese medicine, insomnia, vertigo, temperature dysregulation issues, aches and pains. Venom has worked for me. And that's where, when you find something that works that you can grow in your yard, it's unbelievable. And then to have it give you honey and all these other beautiful things pollinating. It made one of my apricot trees and one of my peach trees out here that were like a dead twig. The bees being in the neighborhood have totally reactivated my trees. My neighbors talk about it on their trees. Everything's in bigger bloom. And then in the last 6 years I've been raising bees here, we've got lizards going like crazy everywhere now. There's tons of birds hanging out because they're all feeding on the bees. The lizards are feeding on the bees. We've got garden snakes now. I mean, it's just really interesting to see how it's a holistic medicine that's actually a huge part of our lives every day. I mean, you figure 3 out of 4 bites of food we eat have to come from bees, so it's been not only a personal savior of medicine, but it's also been a great awakening. I mean, I've never given bees a second thought. I always like, hey, there's bees, no big deal. But now it's like, wow, these bees healed me. They feed the world, and look at how we treat them. So it's changed me in a lot of ways to where now I'm not just a bee meridian therapist, but I'm an advocate for the bees. I raise these bees. I feel for the bees when I take their lives to do these treatments, and because of that, I try to use the oldest bees. And I get bees that have just recently died where they're still moist, and I can use the stingers from deceased bees. There are ways to do bees, use bee venom without killing the bee, but it's very difficult because you kind of beat them up in the process.
Interesting. So,
but it's,
again, I'm very intrigued by a lot of different things that we're talking about here. One, I guess, before we kind of go deep down a different, channel of thought, what are your thoughts on the fact that currently, pesticides are killing bees in rampant rates? It's been, I think it's been all over the news now for, I don't know, several years. I think it's been almost like 5 years, maybe more, that people have been talking about the death of bees and how the bee population on our earth is extremely important to food growth, to just plant growth, which is essentially what's going to feed everything, right? And as we strive to feed the population, the growing population on our planet, we continue to try to come up with better pesticides that make the food or the yield of the plant or harvest, whatever it is, better. But in doing so, we're using pesticides that might be killing the bees, which then in turn are going to limit pollination and further down the road hinder the growth of food and yield of harvest and all that kind of stuff. What do you think is our best solution kind of moving forward, and I guess trying to protect the bee populations on Earth while also trying to deal with feeding the growing population of our planet?
Well, and those are excellent points, and I just read an article that was talking about the, in the last few years, we've lost literally, they said maybe 10 or 20 million songbirds in the Southwest.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking massive bird die-off right now. And they say, and the article was really irritating to me because they're like, oh, it's got to be global warming. Where's all the bugs going? And it's like, are you kidding me? This is where we're thinking. It's not global warming. Yeah, maybe it has something to do with it, but it's exactly what you said. When we're putting 800 and what is it, 800 million? Is it 800 million? I think it's about 800 million pounds of pesticide on our food. Well, in my own experience, I can raise bees here all day long, no problem. If I take my bees to a farm where they put the pesticides on the food, my hives die every year.
Interesting.
And so this is what's happening. And this is a very controversial reality. You know, the genetically modified foods, it sounds like great science, but to me, it's a lot like cortisone. You know, you got a sore spot in your knee, you're going to add cortisone. Same in the farm. You got bug problems, you're going to add these heavy duty pesticides. Well, it's going to look nice for a little while. The plants are going to look a little cleaner when they get to the store. You're not going to see that where there's marks on them from bugs eating them. They're going to look better, but they may not be better. They may have a bunch of pesticides in them, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing Dr. Zach Bush of Revolution Medical Clinic in Virginia. Dr. Zach Bush is an amazing doctor who's a cancer specialist, and he's gone around the country and he's mapped the waterways and he's mapped cancer. Okay. And what he's found is terrifying. And he's just presented this to the EPA last year. What he's found is that wherever the waterways are, there's levels of pesticides. As those levels of pesticides are concentrated in the water, what we see is cancer side by side going up with those levels. All right. So when you look at the Mississippi, they call it Cancer Alley, the last 100 miles of the Mississippi. There's more cancer there than anywhere in the world. Wow. Ounce for ounce. And the map shows the pesticides concentrating in the rivers and then evaporating into the fog in those areas. And so the people living in those areas, they've tested the water, they're testing the air, and they're finding that it matches, you know, that there's so much pesticides in the air and the fog and the rain that the cancer rates are the highest anywhere in the United States, right along Cancer Alley there. And they call it Cancer Alley. And it's directly linked. The map of concentrations in cancer go hand in hand. And this is where I feel it's really a dangerous thing that we're dealing with right now. Because if you look online, you'll find, if you Google robo bees, the genetically modified companies that are making these GMO foods, and again, there's some really dirty business going on here. And it's unfortunate because, like if you're a foreign country like Africa, different countries in Africa, you want to get American food aid, you're going to have to, it gets the American package, which is GMO food seeds have to go with you. And so if these companies, if like say, this is why they had this problem in Haiti, when Haiti, they received all this aid from the United States, they had to have the GMO food as part of that aid. Well, the Haitians didn't want to, they do their own trade of, they do their own seed sovereignty. They do their own seed trading. And if they're going to accept aid from the United States, they're going to have to do patented GMO seeds. Well, then that ruins food sovereignty. That threatens their future food supply if they can't afford those GMO seeds. And so that's why Haiti burned all the seeds from us. They didn't want it. India's doing the same thing. And the reason is that, you know, you can't own life. It's a really screwed up American idea that you can patent life and then charge people for seeds. It's killed seed saving. It's killed seed sovereignty in the United States. And it's been a really big problem. And so this is, you know, what I believe we need to be doing is really looking at the holistic picture again. This is what bees always have done in the past. They always look at the big picture. That's how they work. That's how we should work. That, you know, we can lose more vegetables to bugs, but we can't be adding more and more pesticides and expecting this to continue to work. You know, if we're doing organic farming, if we're doing, there's a lot of different things you can do to actually not make it a monoculture crop and not need as many pesticides. They've proven that when you grow, for example, garlic in between anything else, if you just do every other plant garlic in between kale and all these things, then the garlic keeps the bugs away. You know, there's all kinds of different things you can do in organic agriculture. and that will keep your yields going and increase the diversity on these fields. And this is a big problem we see in California, for example, is that bees go out there to pollinate the orchards, and bees like diversity. They like the weeds. They like all these noxious weeds that everybody sprays. Well, those weeds provide the immune function to the bees, but they also provide the diversity they need. So it's like if you're a bee, you don't want to eat one thing your whole life. You want to eat as many varieties of things as you can. And again, this is where, really what's happening is that, humans are being a bit greedy and short-sighted on how we're approaching our agriculture. I think what we need to be doing in agriculture is embracing diversity and embracing crop resistance, and that's not genetically modifying. When you breed crops for resistance, that's different than blasting genetic material into the seed with platinum to reprogram it and create a whole new protein chain that you've never seen before, the world's never seen before. One thing we know about GMOs is that the wild bees in the United States are the ones the greatest at threat, not to mention the honeybees. Okay, so just to show you a little bit of what's going on, America used to have 45 million beehives, honey beehives. Now we have 2.5 million.
Wow.
We import about 15 million hives from all over the world, a lot of them from Australia. A lot of these hives that we import to do the pollination of just the almond crops or other things, a lot of these hives are bringing in the Varroa mite, for example, that now carries viruses that attack the bees. So it's not just the pesticides, it's the having to import all these other bees. And just like COVID is spread through contact, same with these bee diseases and the viruses that have come from all over the world. And so, when you're having to import and crisscross all these different bees from all these different countries, it's going to affect everything we have here. And what really needs to happen, in my opinion, is that we need to embrace the diversity that nature has for us. We need to embrace the fact that organic farming has constantly shown better yields than GMO. GMO has never surpassed natural farming practices in yield. They say it does, but it's always diminished returns because they have to add more and more pesticides. You have to buy these patented seeds, and there's so much toxic runoff. If you look in India, genetically modified food has created debt to all the farmers, and it's created an epidemic of suicide.
Yeah, I read a study about that as well, where anyway, very interesting stuff where essentially farmers in, I think it was India, had to buy the seeds. Maybe they were even given it at first, or maybe they were given it at a discount. Whatever it was, they didn't get a great yield the first year. Then they didn't have any seeds because they didn't have the crop growth, and the GMO seeds don't produce seeds to then regrow. So then they had to purchase next seeds, and they were giving them at another discount, maybe again in a second year of unfavorable, yield, whatever it was. And then they couldn't afford to even pay for the seeds from the first year, whatever it was. A whole bunch of farmers committed suicide. I'll try and look for the link, and I'll put it in show notes, but it was a really interesting story that I essentially read exactly what you're talking about. Now, we've been talking a lot, John, about honeybees specifically. When you're doing your acupuncture, is it have to be a honeybee? Can there be other bees? Like, are the venoms, drastically different between the different bee species, or kind of, do you have any opinion on that or thoughts on that?
Well, honeybees are the most resilient bees. And this is what I had a little point I was going to make, is that one thing they found about genetically modified foods or crops with bees. Okay, so American bees, there's about 3,000 species of Native American bees. They cannot survive in even 1% of GMOs. It kills them. They die and they don't come back. And that's the biggest problem I see going from coast to coast in this country, is we're overly monoculture cropping. We're overly dependent already on genetically modified foods, and they're destroying the bugs. This thing where all the birds are dying in the Southwest because there's no food for them. Well, it's a no-brainer when you're killing every extra bug, every weed near a farm. We're just killing everything. So of course there's no bugs. They're just getting wiped out by all this chemical. Now, the native bees are the most sensitive, so they can only handle about 1% of pesticides in their life. Bees, on the other hand, are much more resilient. Honeybees, they're much more resilient. The European honeybees, particularly, is what we have here. Russian and Italian and a few different varieties. And those honeybees, they can handle up to about 40% pesticides without totally dying. They still survive. And, and so in terms of bee medicine therapy, honeybee venom, all the venoms are a little different, but they're all essentially the same. And they've found this, they found this worldwide. They've studied pollen all over the world. They've studied propolis. Propolis is the tarry substance that the bees make from the resins and rosins of buds and trees in spring. So that's the sticky stuff that they use to build the hive. And so what they've found is no matter where you are in the world, no matter what plants there are, the propolis is all universally very antibacterial, antiviral, antimicrobial, antifungal. It's very wide spectrum antibiotic in a sense. And in England, actually, propolis is considered antibiotic, and you're not technically allowed to be owning big amounts of propolis because it's considered a drug, which is really kind of crazy. But propolis has been shown to help numerous different kinds of internal problems because it's so powerful, and honey as well. And then pollen is incredibly good for reproductive health. And the thing about pollen is it's packed with protein, packed with vitamins and minerals, lots of B vitamins. The problem is that pollen is the most easily contaminated by pesticides. And see, this is the problem I have with this GMO thing, is that there's no way to isolate it. It should be in a lab, not out in the open air. It should never have been in the open air. It's where you have case after case in Canada where farmers they're an organic farm. They get pollen from a GMO plant in their field. It changes their field's plants. And now if the GMO company comes and tests their organic plant, it's going to have a trace. It's going to have code of a genetically patented pollen. And now they're breaking the law and they can lose their entire farm.
That's wild.
And this has been happening. So it's, the GMOs are destroying food sovereignty. They're destroying diversity, and they're not embracing nature in any way. And these same companies have now developed what they call a robo bee. So they've actually got these little computer controlled electric bees, and this is their solution for pollination. You got to buy these electric bees that have computer algorithms built into them, and they'll fly all over the crops in crisscrossing patterns to pollinate and cross-pollinate. And they're electric, solar electric.
Wow.
That gives me chills.
It's scary.
Who wants a robo bee?
Yeah, well, not only that, but if we're able to make robot bees, it reminds me of this post that I think my brother-in-law Dane maybe shared. Somebody told me about this theory that all pigeons are American drones that are spying on the people, or like some weird crazy thread. And I'm like,
yeah.
Okay, well, that's obviously not true, at least in my opinion. But if we're able to make, robot bees, it's like, well, where does, I don't know, at some point I feel like technology, we might want to stop tampering so much that it's like we can't even tell the difference between what's real and what's fake. And I mean, that might go into a whole different version and deep dive in like AI and stuff like that. We've kind of gone down the rabbit hole here with just genetically modified foods and stuff. And I guess before I want to take us to the next section of the show that we call the fire round. But before we go there, I just want to know what's kind of next for you in the next like 3 to 5 years, John. You've started this, I don't know, bee therapy. You didn't call it acupuncture. It was pharmatherapy or pharmapuncture, I think is what you're saying.
Pharmapuncture or it's bee venom meridian therapy using the
Okay.
meridians. Yeah.
So yeah, what's your next 3 to 5 years looking like with all of that and with growing the bees and everything that you're doing?
Well, for me, it's like, my whole life, I've always loved nature and been an outdoor guy, an environmentalist and a photographer. And, and I really like the adventure thing. And when I say adventure, I mean, I like to embrace the unknown as a way of life every day. And there's a lot of things, there's so much I'm learning about this. And it's, it's sad to me and it's irritating that we have so many people that believe science is the only answer and genetically modified is the only way to go. And that robo bees are somehow good for us. They say, oh, well, the robo bees are great. They won't sting you. And if they land on a plant and they sense an insect, they have pesticide in the robo bee that can spray and kill the insect. And I'm just like, this has nothing to do with nature. See, one of the things that I'm working with is that the bee medicine has been handed down to me through oral tradition, through the samurai lineage, from my teacher, from her teacher to her. There's not a lot of written history. The ancient Taoists are the ones that really studied nature, and they see all of the stars of the Big Dipper relate to each of our meridians in our organs. Like they see the world outside of us as the world inside of us. What the Taoists, and that's mostly what I'm aligned with as a Taoist priest. I'm a medicine priest, ordained through Master Chen and the Wudang Monastery in China. So I'm the 26th generation lineage carrier of Dao medicine under Shifu Wudang Chen. And what my goal in the next 3 to 5 years is to continue to teach ways where humanity and nature can be joined in harmony, not in conflict. There's just too much of that. I totally believe in, vegan, vegetarian lifestyle, but I am type O blood and live at extreme high altitude and cold weather. And I find that I harvest meat. Same with this bee venom. If I'm dying, I'll harvest the venom to heal myself. And so really it's about, to me, what my goals are is to inspire people to rethink their relationship to themselves and nature, to rethink our relationship to the planet and to one another, especially like where things are right now in our country. There's so much anger. There's so much, I know and you don't know, and all this intellectual property, whatever. It's like the intolerance and racism, the fear that Trump has created and the division that he's created. It's been separating everyone, and that's that ancient thing: divide and conquer. And that's where I think people need to really rethink what they're doing to participate in this mess, and that we need to come back together. We need to realize no matter what color our skin is, we're all in the same boat here. We're on life raft Earth, and we have limited resources, and we have a huge level of toxins and what I would call a crisis of unawareness of nature. That right now on the planet, most people don't have a healthy relationship with nature. They look at it as it's cold and dangerous and uncivilized or whatever. But, you and I and all these adventure people we know, when you're humbled by a 100-foot waterfall or the magnitude of nature, you can't help but have reverence. Yeah. And I think that's one of my goals. My biggest goal is to, continue to heal people that are seeking solutions that are holistic and natural, that minimize, damage to the earth or to themselves when they're healing, and trying to really rekindle that awareness that we're not separate of nature. We're not above it. that we are part of it, that it is emanating through us, and we need to really seek that harmony within ourselves and outside of ourselves. And that, having grown up in Georgia, I hated the racism that I saw there, that was propagated by my parents, even to me. And we had a lot of difficult nights, when they would tell a stupid joke and I'd say, look, I live in New Mexico. I'm a minority. I don't like racist jokes, and I'm not going to laugh. And it would be uncomfortably quiet the rest of the night. And it was just like, well, that's what I am. I'm not going to be racist. Yeah. Because it's a lie. It's you know what I mean? And so it's just really important, I think, that we really begin to understand our real nature with each other and with the earth. I
love how you put it too, that we're not necessarily above nature, that we're part of it. And it really just like ties it all together. And it is a very simplistic and clear view of that exact thing, where we're not above the earth and our planet, our nature as a whole. We're a part of it. And I think within that, we all just have to figure out how to live harmoniously as just another part of this planet, as another part of nature, as another part of just everything, all holistically kind of put together. And we could go deep down all of that too, John. I feel like this podcast is going to run super long. We might have to bring you on for maybe a second episode or something, but I'm going to move us on to the next section of the show that we call the fire round. And I'm going to fire a couple quick questions off at you, John, before we kind of end this whole thing. John, do you have a favorite quote that you live by?
I was looking at that. I was thinking, some of my favorite quotes, one of them that I've lived by, when I went to school in Northern California at Humboldt State University, I had a near-death car accident. And after that, I gave myself a pretend funeral. And I said, if I died yesterday, then, and if I could come back, what would I do? What would I do? Not what society wanted me to do that I thought I should do for society. And I came back and I changed my major from oceanography to recreation administration. So I basically wrote a degree in adventure travel. And my favorite quote that I used in those days was by Mark Twain, which he says, essentially, I butchered it a little, but it basically says, never let school get in the way of your education.
I love that.
And several semesters in a row, I would take a sabbatical. My first one off, I went to Russia for a few months and did a river trip in the Altai Mountains. The next year I did 6 months in India. And then the next year it was 6 months in India and Nepal. And those really helped me solidify the fact that I need to follow the things I love, and that the success will follow. If I'm doing what I'm passionate about, then something good will come of it. Yeah. One of my other favorite quotes, though, that I think is really important for all of us today, and this is something that my wife has sometimes had a hard time with, especially since this post-lightning thing. One of the things I noticed that changed in me the most after getting hit by lightning was my relationship to time. And then I realized we think we have free will. And from the time I got electrocuted in 2004 to moving forward to treating Lyme in 2014, the one thing about time that had changed in me was that I felt like I had all the time in the world, only if I could be present. And so my thought was that, you had mentioned what are the few things you would leave behind? What would you say? It would say,
if you were to leave this earth and everything that you've done was to be erased, everything would be gone, and you were only left with one piece of paper and a pen, and you could leave three things to be true. What would they be?
I would say, if I could go back in time, what would I tell myself? I would say, stay focused on the presence, on being present. It's the only gift we have. If you're really present to everything, and this is what I think a lot of you extreme people would always relate to, is that, when we do extreme sports, you're not thinking about the rent. You're not thinking about the you're not thinking about the parking brake on the RV that just rolled backwards into the lake like Eric Jackson did that one day. When you're present to the extreme moments, or when you're on the huge waterfall, you're very present to that moment.
Right.
You're not distracted by anything else. And I think, it's like, and Eric's a huge inspiration to me. But when I saw that RV rolling backwards, I thought, oh, bummer, it's just, maybe he was distracted. Right. So what I would tell myself is that, keep loving the dream, stay present, and that life is brief. Life is way briefer. This is one thing that the bees have shown me, is that most bees live about 45 days. And then in the winter, they extend their life about 5 times and live about 6 months. And the winter bees. And so seeing the bees, how short their life is, they never really sleep. And so I just thought, well, life is brief. And so stay present. It's the only gift we have. And that was, and this comes to this Chinese quote from the Dao. They say, the only time you have is the time you take. So take your time. And that's my underlying reality now is, I don't want school to get in the way of my education, but it doesn't mean that I can't be educated. It's like, you got to follow your passions, stay present, and keep it simple.
That's amazing.
So,
John, you have shared so much knowledge and years of experience with us. This has been incredible. For anybody out there that wants to connect with you, what would be maybe the best way for someone to reach out to you?
They could send me an email or friend me. I'm on Instagram, john.fullbright. I'm on Facebook, John Fullbright. And I've got a new website I'm building, and that's called Dao Bees. So that's taobees.com. And it's not quite launched yet, but in the next few, it will be.
Cool.
And or they could call me. My email is johnfullspirit@gmail.com. And then we could put all that in the tagline or something.
Yeah,
but
I'll throw that all in there for sure, and have people reach out to you. Now, I'm assuming that with all that they could reach out to you if they were interested in trying the bee pharmapunture and essentially try your Eastern medicine on themselves.
Yeah, there's several ways to do it. The best way, if somebody's really hurting, is to come to New Mexico. I do tours to different areas, but with COVID, we've been kind of on no travel program.
Right. Just
staying close to home, let the hospitals clean out, so we're just keeping it simple right now.
Very cool.
But I do, it's, if somebody comes here, it's a little daunting to start learning how to sting yourself with bees. And I know there are there's a lot of groups online, healing Lyme with bee venom and this and that, using bee venom to treat Lyme disease. But, the fact is that, when you're a patient, it's nice to be a patient and not have to try to be the practitioner all at the same time. So right. The best thing to do is to come here and we do allergy tests. We always have lots of EpiPens. I'm very close to a hospital just in case somebody's to have a reaction. And, that's the most important thing, is you don't want to just go out and start stinging yourself with bees, because even somebody that gets stung a lot can develop reactions. And one of the an expert allergy specialist has informed me that, how people develop allergies is they get, say, stung, and then they go a long time without any venom and then get stung again. And the immune system takes about 6 weeks to develop a reaction. And so people can get big reactions. I had a beekeeper friend that developed severe near-death allergy reactions to bees. And he was getting stung by 20 bees. And then time would go by, and then he'd get stung by 5 bees. And then time would go by and he'd get stung by 1 bee. And that 1 bee would just send him into a reaction. Wow. Well, in cases where, to prevent that, once you're able to do venom, if you start on venom, the idea is if you're going to use it for treatments, you actually have to continue with it on a really consistent basis. They say about 5 bees a week or 20 bees a month or 200 bees a year. If you can consistently deliver the venom in little doses, you'll never develop an allergic reaction. For those that have developed an allergic reaction, there's Medicaid, and most doctors do this thing called low dose immunotherapy, where if somebody's having big reactions, they can get really teeny doses 3 days a week. And then soon their body will learn how to mitigate the reaction. And my friend that was having deadly reactions, he's now able to take more than a full sting from bees because he works through that low dose immunotherapy. And that has to be done by a doctor.
Wow.
And even, one note with bee venom is that, I'm not advocating that people really do this. I'm not trying to say it'll treat everything in the world. It doesn't work for everybody. But I always tell my patients and people interested in doing bee venom to work with a doctor. Have a doctor overseeing what you're doing. Make sure you got your EpiPens. Make sure you know how to use them. Make sure you have somebody else with you that knows how to use them. Because people can have big reactions, and these aren't like, life-threatening anaphylactic reaction is nothing to mess with. And that's what I mean by, part of my goals is to develop this awareness and reverence for nature. So bee venom is not something that you abuse to feel better. It's something that's a very serious practice. It's a very humbling practice to have to take the life of a bee, something that I love. And it's something that I have to be very careful with. So I always try to use the minimum amount, but you also need to use what you need. So it's kind of it's a very different paradigm, that one that I wasn't really prepared for in the beginning, but now after years of doing this, it is such a magical thing, and it is so wonderful to bring. It's another way for humans to understand their connections to nature. And like I say, it's something that I always recommend working with a doctor. Get a baseline metabolic panel so that you know where all your functions and your organs are at before you start venom. And then as you go, working through whatever disease you're trying to treat, you want to monitor those levels in your body, how your digestion, how's your liver working, kidney function. Same if you were taking really heavy duty IV antibiotics. You really want to monitor all your body's functions, because you don't want to guess, you want to test. And, in my case, I didn't have a lot of choices financially. I was dying of Lyme disease and mold exposure and whatever. And I was able to get highly informed and go very slowly and with great reverence and care. And wow, turned me around.
So that's incredible, and great advice there as well for anybody out there that's interested with this bee venom therapy. Definitely check in with your doctor. I'm not trying to say anybody should go out there and just sting themselves with a whole bunch of bees. Go study up on it, consult your doctor, and go the professional route, and do this. If you're going to go that route, do it with someone who has studied under this practice, like yourself or someone else out there. John, I also try to finish up the show by adding value in any way that I can. So is there something that you're focusing on right now that I might be able to help you out with, or possibly my listeners might be able to help you out with?
Well, part of what I'm looking for is I'd like to do a clinical trial to prove the bee venom. And so that's going to take funding, and it takes awareness. And the thing about bee venom is it's not a lot of pharmaceuticals around the world are studying this substance and they want to patent it. What I'm saying is, no, we need to really look at what the bees are doing for us themselves. They make this most magical substance of bee venom and propolis and pollen and wax and honey, and all of these bee medicines have a way of life for us. And we just need to try to not to own everything, and try to really understand that this is the people's medicine. This is something nature or God or whatever you want to say is providing to us. And so it's one of those things that, what I'm trying to do is create awareness around that. We don't know enough about this, and we want to see it, especially like with COVID. The report came out of China that none of the beekeepers in Wuhan had contracted COVID, even though some of their family members that don't use bee venom had died of it. The beekeepers that were being stung regularly are these apitherapists that are using the bee venom in China. Right in Wuhan city, they were saying that they hadn't even contracted the virus. So it has many different applications. It's just, when the only bottom line that people are looking at is money, then it gets pushed to the side, so they can develop their own patent. And again, that's not really what my intentions are. My intentions are to help people understand that nature has a solution for
Wow.
most of these things. And I'm not sure how well it works on COVID. I know the Germans did a study and they had about 700 apotherapists that participated. And I think only one of them had died from COVID, but there's a huge need for a reconnection with nature in our society. That's one of my biggest things. And the other one is to not only reconnect us with nature, but also to really study what these bees are doing and what it can do. If we were able to develop some bee venom inhalers that would work better than cortisone to help the lungs and have no negative side effects, that would be a fantastic, so there's a big realm there. For me, it's about getting back to nature, not exploiting it and splicing it into little boxes.
I like that.
So anybody out there that might be able to help or has any ideas of how maybe John can get this clinically tested, I think that's a great next step. And I think that's a great route that you're going there, John. Thank you again so very much for your time today. This has been an incredible conversation, and I feel like we could talk for hours longer, even though it's already been a pretty long podcast. So I think we'll probably have to get you on for another episode later on. But thank you for all the knowledge that you have shared with us. And I personally, again, have gotten a ton of value. I've been stung by you in your practice last year before COVID and all that kind of stuff, and had a great experience with you there. So for anybody out there, please check out John, connect with him on social media, check out his website. And if you've got questions, just reach out and ask. He's a great individual, and obviously, as you can tell today, has lots to share. So thank you guys all for listening. And as well, if you guys got value out of this episode, I highly encourage, as always, if you could please share it out with a friend or family member that you think might need to hear this episode or hear some of the knowledge shared, or just copy and paste the link and throw it up on your social media and share it that way as well. So please, if you guys could share it out, that would be amazing. And that's all we're looking for through this, to grow our community, to share this knowledge, and to spread as a collective. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, John, so much for your time. I'm Nick Troutman signing off, wishing you all an awesome day. Cheers.
What are you talking about?